Welcome to Fearlessly Made You. I am your host, Kristie Tobias. Joining me today are guests just striving to dominate in their personal and professional lives while answering the question, what does it mean to be fearlessly made? Welcome to this episode of Fearlessly Made You. Y'all, I'm excited because I wanted to spend some time just teaching you a little bit more about what Fearlessly Made You is. Fearlessly Made You, FMY, whatever you want to call it. I think there's so much power and purpose and really diving into that a little bit more with you guys and talking a little bit more about my journey. So a lot of you may know that Fearlessly Made You is the product or kind of the spinoff of my book, Fearlessly Made You. I know, look at that. Isn't it beautiful? Yeah, you're welcome. And so as part of the book, what Fearlessly Made You actually dives into within the book is my journey with post-traumatic stress disorder. And what that means is I actually, from when I was 14 till I was 20, I was raped, abused, and sexually assaulted by someone who I thought I trusted and really should have never trusted. And in that journey, I was a child. And as a child, there's so many parts of our lives that we tell ourselves are normal that really are not, especially when you're going through trauma. And I think with Fearlessly Made You, the book, I was able to explore a lot of those areas and be honest and authentic about them, and be honest and authentic about the things that have been part of my life that have helped shape me, the things that have been part of my life that do not serve me anymore, and the things that are part of my life that are uncertain, that I don't really understand. And throughout all of those pieces, throughout kind of diving into this journey in my book, I realized if I'm feeling that, other people must be feeling that as well. So how do I connect and relate and engage and be vulnerable and honest, not only about my journey with this book, but about my journey now? And so like I shared, I want to kind of dive into the book a little bit, but then I want to talk to you about where I'm at now. So with Fearlessly Made You, the book, I spent pretty much like a year writing down this journey that was very intimate to me. I talk about my family a lot in the book, and I'm not going to give it away because you just have to buy it to find out. But I talk about why my family is so important to me, the things that we've been through, and I'm really honest about it. But I also talk about what does fearless mean? Fearless does not mean being without fear. It means that we don't allow fear to own our journey. And so for my Fearlessly Made You crew, my FMY crew, you all have been a part of that journey with me. When I released the book and talk about it, I talked about the journey through my post-traumatic stress disorder, the therapy and counseling that I went through, which I'm actively in now. But also, I'm really honest about every part of our journey is a phase that we have to own, whether it's messy or not. I've been saying this phrase lately called the messy build. The messy build is important because it makes you who you are. Your journey is your journey alone. You are the only person who can live out your fearless existence. And so in thinking about that, one of the parts of Fearlessly Made You, the book, that I don't think a lot of people realize is there's actually a subtitle that's part of it, which is Fearlessly Made You, Surviving and Thriving in This Perfectly Imperfect Life. And it's the thriving part that I think is so important. Thriving does not mean that everything is wonderful. Thriving actually means that you're making a choice. You're making a choice to say, this life as it is now, I am choosing to allow my existence to be owned by me. So it does not mean that I am choosing to control it. It means I'm choosing the way I respond to it. There's so many things that happen in our life that are outside of our control. There's so many people that come into our life that, we connect with them and engage with them in this season. But in the next season, they don't need to be part of it because that value and benefit that you bring to each other is no longer there. There's so many phases of our life that we have to be honest with ourselves about and asking ourselves, is this serving me or do I need to shift perspectives? And so that is a lot of what I wanted to talk with you guys about today. A lot of you know, if anyone has been following me on social media, which I know a lot of you have, you know that I've been in a little bit of a transition phase right now. So part of that transition is really exciting and part of it is kind of scary. And one of the things that I'm so excited about with the transition is I actually have moved from Pensacola, Florida. I know I've shared that with you guys, but as a note, I have moved. And that move was scary and exciting all at the same time. I actually moved to Smyrna, Georgia, which is right outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And that move was really purposeful. My family is closer to North Carolina. And so this move helped me be closer to them. But to be really honest, I found that where I was at in Pensacola, I had kind of maxed out the value and benefit that I was bringing within my own life. And I was starting to find myself down this path where I was getting comfortable or complacent. And there's no problem whatsoever with being comfortable, but when comfortable shifts to complacent, for me, that's not a healthy space for me to be in. And I allow and tolerate things in my life that are not serving me. That kind of goes into a lot of why I wanted to have this conversation with you guys today. I've been in this space where I was tolerating parts of my life that were not beneficial. One of those parts of my life, and again, I told you I'm going to be very vulnerable and honest with you, is my relationship with certain things, such as alcohol. Y'all know I love wine, and that has not changed. I still love wine, but I love wine culture and not wine. And I had to shift a little bit of that. I found that for me, I was reaching for a glass of wine just because, instead of really being intentional in the purpose behind why are you drinking that. And I know that sounds super deep, but what it started leading to was on a Monday night, I would go out and have a glass or two or three or a bottle. And yeah, I'm being real honest with you. And what I found was physically, mentally, spiritually, wine was replacing, and not just wine, just alcohol was replacing relationships that I needed to have with myself. I'm not good at being alone. I don't like it. And so instead of being alone at my own home, I was going out and grabbing a glass here, a drink there, and increasing that so that I didn't have to be within myself. And so I share that with you because I have found along this journey, as I've shifted into this place where right now I am not drinking alcohol. I made that choice. So when you guys see me cheersing in my glass, it is sparkling water because I do love sparkling water. Y'all, the sparkling water game has been totally underrated and underestimated. There's some fun sparkling waters out there. I'm just letting you know. Ping me if you would like to know some of the delicious sparkling waters. I have a really great selection for you. I did try the whole non-alcoholic wine game. It is not as exciting as it sounds. They do some great commercials for that. It is not as exciting as it sounds. It was not delicious, but I digress. So what I found though is, and shifting into moving things out of my life, like alcohol, that were distracting me and disrupting me, and honestly almost destroyed my Fearlessly Made You journey or my FMY journey, what I found was clarity. And it didn't all happen at once. I scared myself into a place of needing to shift substances like alcohol out of my life, but then I had to understand what that meant. So what do I do now? What does that look like? And in the area and space that I was living in, I realized I had outgrown the me I was, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. And the me that I am now needed to understand what value, benefit, and even grace looks like. So as part of this dialogue, I want us to know that we are not our mistakes, and we have the ability to accept the grace to know that, and to accept the grace to make the mistakes, acknowledge the imperfections, but know that that's part of your journey. And if you don't learn the lesson in those mistakes, then you're missing the opportunity to grow in this next phase. So this next phase of my journey is incorporating, the move to Atlanta. I sold my house in Pensacola and bought a new house in Atlanta at the exact same time. I don't recommend that. It was a little bit of a journey. And a lot of y'all learned about that journey. Things that I've learned from that journey. Buying and selling a house is a lot of work, and it's a lot of extra work, and it's a lot of work. Did I mention it's a lot of work? That part. But the reward on the other side of it, having this really cool place that I have as a solace now, because I don't know about y'all, but sometimes when we have been in a space for a long time, there are great memories, but there are also memories that can be triggering and that can be a little traumatic. And I realized my space here was a little triggering for me, and it wasn't in a place where I could acknowledge the benefit in it. I realized that it was time for someone else to have a history or a journey in my house that was theirs. And so in that shift to Atlanta, I've been able to kind of recognize this new space for myself, this space where I'm able to connect with the person that I'm growing to be. I think sometimes we talk about connecting with the person I used to be. That's not a thing. You got to this point in your life, you've grown from the person that you were on purpose. So I don't want to go backwards, I want to move forward, but it's a space of uncertainty, which I'm finding exciting and kind of stressful and a lot all at once. But it's a space where I have the clarity now because I've removed the distractions and disruptions that allow me to have the clarity to kind of see myself. understand myself, feel, who I am and my purpose and my power. But more than anything, and you guys have seen Bree Snellgrove on this show with me. She is behind the scenes right now. She, is the woman behind all of this, her and Travis, who runs all of the video equipment and everything. But Bree and I were having this conversation. She's like, it's intentionality. And I had lost that word. I had stopped being intentional about how I operate. And I'll get a little emotional. I stopped being intentional about what was important to me. And in that, I almost found myself in a space where I lost the intentionality in my own life. And that's not okay. I think a lot of times we see people who are successful and who seem like they're thriving, and we just assume every part of their life is thriving, and that's not the case. I will always challenge to say, if you see someone thriving, there is a challenge that they're working through to get to that space of strength. Strength doesn't come from nowhere. Strength comes from a struggle or a challenge, because you're identifying, I don't have to be a victim. I don't have to be in survivor mode. I can very much move myself through the mountain, through the challenge, through the messiness, and thrive through it because it's important and because it's what brings you to that next phase of your life. So it's having the grace to accept the mistakes, but having the grace to know that those mistakes are learning opportunities. The other part of that, though, is too, what I'm learning, and it's also why I love Fearlessly Made You, the podcast. I've talked about the book. So now as we talk about the podcast and the TV show, because really that's what we're doing here. Y'all have heard me talk to you guys about that I'm Chris Oprah. I am the Kristie version of Oprah. You're welcome. But no, I love Oprah and I adore Oprah, but I'm doing something that is me. And with this podcast and this show, I'm doing something that's allowing other people to talk about their journey and their stories. And so that's the part where, I talk about accepting the grace to own your mistakes and to be okay with those and comfortable with moving and learning through them. Now it's accepting the ability to share grace with other people and to learn from their journeys. One of the things, and there's a verse in the Bible that talks about where a king had forgiven one of the servants or subjects because they had a debt that was paid and they were late on it and they weren't paying it and he was going to throw them in jail. They asked for mercy and grace, and the king granted them mercy and grace. And then that person turned around and they had someone who owed them less money than what that person owed the king. And instead of granting them mercy and grace, they berated them. They were terrible to them. And so the king subsequently ended up putting the other person back in jail because they're like, you did not show grace to the least of these when I showed you grace. And I think we have to remind ourselves of that. I'm going to say this. I don't care how controversial it is. People talk about cancel culture all the time. I get it. There are some things that should be canceled. Let's be real honest about that. But there are people who deserve grace. And that is not everyone, because we are not perfect. But think about in your life right now, what are some of the conversations, some of the bitterness, some of the things that I'm holding on to that are making me upset or making me angry? Is it because I am upset, or is it because I haven't extended grace to someone who is also in a place of being imperfect? Now, there's grace and there's being walked all over. Those are two very different things. You can extend grace to someone, but you can also stand up for yourself. You can also be strong in who you are, but you can also remember that other people are learning from their own mistakes as well. I think that's so important. I learn constantly from the mistakes I've made, but I also learn constantly from the people who are feeling like they can be vulnerable with me. My mom told me this once. She's like, I had most of y'all know, I had a real horrible breakup a while ago. It was a hot mess. R.I.P. X. He is not dead, but R.I.P. But in that space, I found out from people a lot later what that person had done, things that they had learned about them. And I was like, why didn't y'all tell me? And my mom said, you shouldn't be asking, why didn't they tell you? You should be asking, what barriers did you put up where people didn't feel comfortable coming to you? Listen, Mama Tobias, I didn't ask for that learning moment, but it was a good one because she was right. And, Bree and I were having this conversation where I have a closed door on a pretty regular basis when it comes to accepting feedback. And that may surprise some of you. Most of you are like, yes, you do. And what I was realizing too, in this space of accepting grace for myself, I was closing the door to giving grace to other people, or closing the door to being open to where not only can I learn, but someone else can learn with me. And so I've been really intentional in this phase of my life right now of saying, okay, how can I be authentic in that space of saying, I am not great at accepting feedback and I'm not great at it, because what I take it as a lot of times is people criticizing the hard work that I've done to get to this place. I used to pride myself on not making the mistakes, as I sit in this season of making all of them. So I had to say, I'm going to open my door a crack and say, okay, let me let in that conversation, because what it's then doing is allowing me to give someone else the grace to have a conversation with me. And so that's the space too, where the podcast comes in. You guys have had the chance to witness so many wonderful guests who are just talking about their own vulnerabilities. And the reality behind that is the entire purpose of Fearlessly Made You, the book, the podcast, the show, is how can we share in our journeys together? We weren't meant to live this life by ourselves. And I don't want us to live this life by ourselves. I want us to feel that connection, that engagement, that ability to laugh together. Y'all know I love to laugh. That ability to be wrong together, that ability to be excited together. But it's just that space of saying, I accept you, you accept me. Let's have the grace and ability to live our fearless existence in a way that does not allow fear to own us, but we're stepping into that space where fear exists and owning the journey. And so in thinking about that, as I kind of wrap up a little bit of this dialogue I'm having with you, I want to give us a challenge of what it means to be intentionally living our life. So intentional living is a place where, we talk about, and y'all have heard me say this, just living my best life, or, YOLO. I challenge, not that that's not a great thing, absolutely live your best life. But what I was doing, because this is my own vulnerable moment of sharing with you, what I was doing was, in living my best life, I was disregarding the things that brought growth and that brought strength and power into my life. So instead of saying, you know what, I'm going to actually be home and really get the rest that I need because it's been a long week, I was saying, well, I have all these people out. They're asking me to come out. I'm going to go out and I'm going to have a glass of wine or 2 or 3 and completely negate the rest, not only that I needed mentally and spiritually, but physically. And that was decisions that I was making more frequently. And in those decisions, I was living my best life, quote unquote. I wasn't living my intentional life. My best life is not someone else's best life. Your best life is not someone else's best life. You have to think about, in these conversations and the things that are presented to me, am I intentionally thinking about the benefit, the impact that they have on who I am and what I'm doing? So being in that space now, again, I did want to go deep. Actually, let me not lie about that. I did want to go deep with y'all. I wanted us to really start to challenge ourselves to think about kind of those 3 things that lie under, we are not our mistakes. That one, grace, accepting grace in those moments of mistake or imperfection, because that's where that learning begins. The second part is giving grace, remembering everyone else is learning just like you are. And so we have the opportunity to provide grace to others as they're in their journey. And then that third part is intentional living. How are we being intentional in the way that we live our lives? What does that look like for you? So with all of that said, I want to close with something exciting. As I've mentioned before, as part of the Fearlessly Made You journey, I've realized again that I can't live this life by myself. And as I'm saying this, you guys can hear, I also can't live this life without a little bit of Florida rain. So we got a little bit of Florida rain happening. That's okay. We're going to embrace it as part of the journey, because rain is actually good luck. It means that something new is coming around the horizon. At least that's what I tell people. But as part of that journey, one of the things that I'm real excited about is I'm building partnerships and connections with others, because I'm realizing there's a really great opportunity to connect and engage with people in a different way if I do that. So one of those partnerships, one of the first partnerships you guys will get to hear about, is my partnership with Dillard's. So I love clothes and I love fashion, as y'all know, but I also find benefit and value, specifically as a Black woman, in owning the way that I look and present myself, not from a superficial way, but from a way that I love me. And I want that to show in the way that I project myself. And so I partnered with Dillard's through Reagan, who's here in Pensacola, Florida, and fabulous Emma, who helps style. And what I was able to do was bring myself out in a way that's connected to fashion. And so I love that this partnership is able to do that, able to help me embrace who I am. And so if you are ever looking for some great styling, some great opportunities to showcase yourself, Reagan in Pensacola, Florida at Dillard's, and really just Dillard's overall, really has some great options for me to be my best self. So with all of that said, y'all, as always, I so appreciate you guys for leaning in to this Fearlessly Made You, this FMY journey. I so appreciate each of you for being honest and vulnerable with yourselves. I think it's so important that we're on this journey together, but that we don't forget that it is messy and that's okay. It is going to be full of, missteps and mistakes, but that's okay. What the important part is that you own your journey and that you help others own their journey as well. So team Fearlessly Made You crew, FMY crew, stay tuned for the next episode of Fearlessly Made You.